Good morning. My name is Janie Montblanc, and on behalf of the Great Basin Fire Science Exchange team and our partners, I would like to welcome you to this webinar titled Assisted Succession, Context and Tools, presented by Jerry Benson, President of BFI Native Seeds. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to let you know that you may ask questions of the speaker or me at any time during the webinar by typing your questions into the questions pane of your control panel that's located at the top right of your screen. I will keep questions for Jerry in the queue and field them after the presentation. I also want to let you know that whatever you do in your control panel does not affect the webinar presentation, so you're welcome to type a test message or test your audio at any time during the webinar. If you're having problems with your audio, please open your audio pane and check your audio option selections. Now I would like to introduce our presenter. Jerry Benson is the president of BFI Native Seeds, LLC in Moses Lake, Washington. Jerry is a botanist, wildlife ecologist, and farmer with a passion for restoration and native plant genetics who founded BFI Native Seeds 9 years ago, though has been producing native seed for nearly 20 years. Jerry, along with his wife and son and nearly 30 other staff members, have provided over 2.8 million pounds of native source-identified seed to their customers. Annually, BFI provides seed and restoration services for over 50,000 acres. Welcome, Jerry, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Do you want to switch the screen?
Yeah, I'm making you the presenter.
Okay, show my screen. Okay, I think it's there. Is that right?
Yep, I
okay.
see it.
Okay. Okay, everybody. Good to have an opportunity to talk about this. This is, as she said, I've had a passion for it for a long, long time, and doing wildlife habitat and restoring grasslands has been very much a part of my life through my career. The initial photo here that says assisted succession on it is actually a site that we started working on in 2001, and it was pretty much a degraded crested wheatgrass cheatgrass site at that time, and we started the process of preparing it to be transitioned into a native community. We started collecting the seeds of the species in a local, I might say, adjacent piece of property, and basically collected at that time blue bunch wheatgrass, Idaho fescue, Sandberg bluegrass, Canby bluegrass, and Thurber's needlegrass. So as well as the next year, as you see, there's a fair bit of yarrow here. We did do some yarrow collections too. But this photo is basically a 10-year snapshot of what transitioning crested wheatgrass, cheatgrass communities to a native community, and this is in about a 9 to 10 inch precip zone. So we will just click on. We started working with these native species back in the 90s as part of some T&E species work that I was doing with Washington Fish and Wildlife. So many of these sites were very cheatgrass dominated, and many of them had crested wheatgrass on them. Some of them even had intermediate wheatgrass, which is actually a whole nother discussion. We were attaining to diversity of grasses and forbs and shrubs in the community, with a focus at that time to be pushing towards quality sagegrouse habitat. So where am I at here? As you can see, again, this photo here, we'll just keep going here. We don't, or we do, let's put it this way, do pretty minimal soil disturbance. We mostly mow the sites and spray with glyphosate to control the crested wheatgrass. Crested wheatgrass is very tough to just spray out. So what we try to do is stage it so that it is mowed and stimulate, and then we oftentimes lightly harrow if we can, and get as much of the crested wheatgrass seedlings that are in the soil seed bank and the cheatgrass seed to germinate before we actually make the applications of the glyphosate. So we come along and bring these, get this disturbance in place, and if we're in very much of a drought, which we don't, seems like we always are, we have to oftentimes do 2 applications of glyphosate to get our control of the crested stands. And so we it's like you see on the screen there, it takes about 15 months for us to go through the process of mowing and harrowing, which are the sort of the staging of the site, so that we get a lot of growth on the crested wheatgrass and as much emergence of the cheatgrass, and we try to get it all killed before seed heads develop. And so that we can take out all of the new seed bank and exhaust the pre-existing seed bank. So this takes us basically through a growing season of Chem fallow. Sometimes we have to follow up. The deep tillage statement that's here is sort of a last resort for us. That is oftentimes more associated with intermediate wheatgrass rather than crested wheatgrass. So we go in and we plant the grasses, and then we of the grass species that we're going to put into the community, and then we follow the succeeding year with our typical broadleaf control, because there's almost always extensive fleshes of mustard and Russian thistle and China lettuce and things like that that tend to come along, so we can control those with a relatively light non-residual broadleaf herbicides, and then we come back in the following fall and plant a collection of forbs. So this is going to be a little series of some of the things and how things kind of look. You can see the insert is a tractor with a rotary mower that we will generally mow these sites. The foreground is the area that was worked on. You can see into the background there is some little areas that look like that they're not part of the sage community. They are also in process of being rehabilitated. So we try to get this condition you see on the screen here is very close to when we will apply the glyphosate. I prefer to get at least 8 inches of fresh crested wheatgrass growth and have the cheatgrass plants either at early heading or just before. I don't like to get them very far into heading because you never know when we're going to have some seed survive the situation. So the summer and the fall is when we're very busy with these things. We will see again here some sagebrush islands that may be preserved. We've done that quite extensively where there is sagebrush involved in these communities. And then in this photo it shows us working on a site there to where after we've sprayed, you can see things look pretty brown, and then we do this harrowing treatment to scratch the surface, incorporate more seeds, and stage the site for planting. So the light tillage with this heavy spring tie and harrow is very critical to getting the seeds into the soil so that we can control them. And this is kind of what it looks like in more of a closer look after we have sprayed and harrowed. You can see that there's a lot of pretty dead-looking plants there, but there's a lot of other stuff, and there is a fair bit of bare ground, but we've got pretty good residual cover so that erosion, both either wind or water, is pretty nominal. So again, here's this Chem fallow look, and we're using the 3 quarts of the Roundup Pro, and then we also use ammonium sulfate as an absorption enhancer. Many of you have some experience with that. It has really changed how effective actual glyphosate applications are. And then the last element there is just a non-ionic surfactant that helps get better distribution on the leaf surface. So challenges of all this. This is how we'd like it to look when we do what we do. It doesn't 100% happen this way, but we have individual escapees out across the landscape. As you can see, some of those crested wheat plants died very well, and some of them managed to escape. We can do tillage, but like I said before, we'd prefer to keep the tillage very superficial, like the harrowing is the main tillage that we generally ever do. But we will come back into a site like this as best possible and retreat for the crested. And what we often do is in a retreatment is that by the time we realize that we're got less than complete control, why we generally also have a flush of broadleafs coming along, so we do some mixtures, including simply 2,4-D with the glyphosate, or dicamba and 2,4-D with the glyphosate, so that we can take out the broadleafs as well as the grasses. So deep tillage, as I said before, is not generally something that we try to do unless it's a sod grass like intermediate wheatgrass, so that we can beat it up a bit, and then we will oftentimes go into it with a sweep chisel and or disc. Very, very seldom have we ever used a moldboard plow. We have used it in some very heavy soil sites where the rhizomatous species were almost indomitable. But that is the rare exception. Mostly we use the harrows as our main tillage. But we try to get in there and do that within a fairly short time after the harrowing. And then we generally follow any tillage with a harrowing so as to bring some of the damage to plants and get their roots more on the surface so they dry out, and you might say so that they die better. I don't know if that's an appropriate term, but we like to get them to die. Here's an example of some of the broadleaf issues that we talk about having to come back on when we are working on that second treatment of the Chem fallow process. You can see that there's a lot of broadleafs there that we can generally fairly easily take out with like 2,4-D and dicamba. So you can see here where we've added in the screen there, we've got the glyphosate and the dicamba there, and so that takes us to a condition here. As you can see, there's still a few green spears out there. Most of the crested is pretty dead. The cheatgrass is very dead. This is almost a storybook photo here of the cheatgrass. You can see it was just getting headed out, and we got the glyphosate on it, and there is no viable seed in that cheatgrass, yet we still have soil cover. So we've got some protective cover on the site, and we have fairly minimally disturbed the site, and with getting positioned to do the planting. As you can see, this is a pretty large site. I think the one that we're working on here is right at 500 acres of a contiguous crested wheatgrass stand. So we got the chemical applications, and then we move to seeding. We prefer to use these Truax drills. They give us excellent soil seed placement. I could go on for a long time on how critical the soil seed contact and placement in the soil is. There's been millions and millions of pounds of seed wasted across the West by getting poor soil seed contact, poor soil seed placement. And these Truax drills, they have depth bands on them. They have a good, accurate metering system. Many of you are familiar with the Truax drills. I think they're not perfect. There's no such thing as perfect, but they definitely are a significant advancement over the old B drills that BLM has used for 50, 60 years. I've used the B drills, and I would never consider using them again. So this drilling system has given us some pretty dang good seeding, so we try to keep that seed placement range from 1/4 to 1/2 inch, which most of the previous drilling systems were from 0 to 1.5 inches or 2 inches, however things just happened to be. So on sites like this, we have this is an area where we had these localized biotypes, and so we were able to utilize these species from source-identified collections of blue bunch and Idaho fescue, sandberg, prairie June grasses. On some other drier sites, we were doing the bottlebrush squirreltail, and in this couple of ones here, we actually didn't have source-identified material for the Indian ricegrass and the thick spike, so we might say stepped back and used what available cultivars there was available. But these are generally the species that we have worked with. You can see kind of how it looks a year or so later. Kind of weedy. This is pre our post-plant broadleaf control. You can see that there is planted species in the drill rows, but there is still cheatgrass, there is still other species. The little inset photo is a pretty nice example of the drill row population. And of course the weed issues. Purple mustard. In this photo, I have to say that we are behind the curve. Purple mustard at this stage is almost impossible to control, but it is an example of what not to do in terms of broadleaf control. This should have been sprayed a couple weeks sooner. So some of the challenges as we go forward here: fall rains that get the cheatgrass off to the races early on us, and sometimes we've had difficulty being able to spray because of it. Seed because of it, and so we will come back in and put on a light rate of glyphosate to take out that fall flush, and when we can, that is very, very effective. That just really clobbers that winter annual grasses effectively. We have even gone in after we've seeded and had, when there'd been the quick emergence of the cheatgrass, why we've done a post-plant applications before the seeds emerge. So anyway, there's a nice field of crested and cheatgrass. We've done this, I'm trying to remember the circumstances. We had a situation on a TNC plot that we worked on where it rained several times and we got multiple flushes of cheatgrass, and we just had to we couldn't do any more spraying, and so we just mowed and mowed, and in the end we got a successful stand. This is, you can kind of see the green spears among all the cheatgrass there. That there is good natives there. The natives will ultimately crowd out. I have got multiple examples of the natives just crowding out the crested wheatgrass. It takes several years, but the natives, if it is the appropriate genetics for the area, the natives just actively displace the crested, and 5 to 10 years down the road, you can't find any of the crested or cheatgrass. So I think we can move towards some questions at this moment. Jeannie, have you got some questions come in?
Yes, I do. So if you have questions, please type them into the questions pane of your control panel. And I have a couple here. Matt Davies asks, what are the implications of harrowing for soil crust communities, or are those largely absent due to historic tillage?
Yes and yes. There are definitely challenges for soil crust, and we are always wanting to encourage soil crust, because the soil crust ultimately becomes a very important part of limiting the preponderance of cheatgrass in the community later on. And that's part of why we try to absolutely minimize the depth of tillage, so that the organisms that are all part of the microbiotic crust are still very present in that surface layer. I don't know if I responded to that adequately, but we are very cognizant of encouraging and minimizing the disturbance to the soil crust. And the historic activities, many of them, there are some fairly decent soil crusts in place as we come in, because the crested stands are 30, 40, 50 years old.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thanks. And then Matt follows up with, same issue goes for drill seeding regarding soil crust. What are the options if ground disturbance needs to be minimized? Can one ever get decent success with broadcast seeding?
Not very often. The conditions have to be really, really very precise and very precisely timed, and we're not accurate enough in our ability to predict precipitation and weather conditions to be very successful with, I might say, a broad plan of broadcast seeding. Immediately behind a big fire, where you've got everything, might say, slicked off, why you can be your potential to be much more successful with a broadcast seeding is greater. But where you go into these long-term stands of crested, you've got to do something to change, to make a big change. Broadcast just doesn't make it.
Okay, thank you. Katie, let's see, I don't know how to say your last name. I'm going to say Grenier, asks, how would you suggest modifying the assisted succession process if the site is grazed by cattle?
Get the cattle off. To be honest, the livestock really compromise what you can do, because they are constantly disturbing the soil surface, and so they are disturbing the soil crust. They create multiple microsites with all their hoof activity for the cheatgrass to occupy and be successful in establishment. And so consequently, I have worked pretty diligently at staying away from areas that are or will be grazed. There's just too many problems with trying to do these sort of things in the context of grazing and expect success.
Okay, thanks. Ann Neville asks, what was the cost of the treatments each year, and how many years before do you consider it, or how many years until you consider it successful?
Okay. We generally don't keep so much of an annual cost log because it changes, and some operations that might be done one year get moved into another year. But generally speaking, we're in that $460 to $490 an acre range of our costing. Then, and that doesn't include like post-project monitoring and stuff. That's mostly just the elements of getting the job done. And so what was I saying? Cost-wise, though, there are things that cause a variation in cost, but for the most part, that mid-upper 400 range covers everything: seed, chemicals, various other, the harrowing, the mowing, the all the different spraying activities. All of those sorts of things are pretty well covered in that number. And I think he asked, how long do you decide if it's successful? We generally have a pretty good indication that things are going to move in the right direction by the time you're at the second year. And by the third or fourth year, if you don't have everything moving in the right direction, you may want to consider going back and starting, I won't say starting completely over again, but stepping in the process to enhance what's already going on, because if you let it go too far, you do have to just go back to square one.
Okay, great, thanks. Cheryl Decker asks, have you had success with successive restoration and Russian thistle dominated former grasslands?
Yeah, Russian thistle is not really too difficult for us to deal with. We have multiple tools to deal with Russian thistle, so it's definitely an issue and can be pretty aggressive. We just are in the about year 3 of a Nature Conservancy project that was old ag land that had been left idle for many years, and it had a royal abundance of Russian thistle. But we're starting to get some pretty good establishment of the natives.
Great, thanks. All right, well, that's the last question I see in the queue. Oh, here's another one. Ann Neville asks, what about bulbous bluegrass?
Bulbous bluegrass is a bit of a nemesis. It really does have to be dealt with in a different way than cheatgrass. The issues of getting it up and getting it controlled, and then we generally try, where there's a bulbous situation, if we can get the right rains in like November. If we don't have a significant snowfall, we will get the bulbous to emerge, and then we put the glyphosate on the bulbous in early December.
Great. And then Deborah Bunch asks, what about Medusa head?
Medusa head is more difficult to deal with. We are working with Ann Kennedy from ARS on the development of the bacteria that is commonly referred to as D7, and it is showing good results or good activity on Medusa head. So this is a process, it's in process. Hopefully within another couple, 3 years, we'll have a lot better handle on what we can do with the biocontrol of Medusa head via bacteria.
Great, thanks. Okay, if you have more questions, keep typing them in. And since this was nice and short and sweet, I hope you don't mind if I ask, if I follow up with the restoring sites that have been grazed by cattle question. So in your opinion and all your years of experience, what can be done for managers that do have to restore in areas where they're still grazing? do you have any suggestions or?
The number one suggestion is the longer you can hold the grazing off, the more likely you're going to get a healthy community. Mm-hmm. And so if you can only hold the grazing off for 2 years or 3 years, you're really, hate to say it, but pushing the rock uphill. If you can get 5 years, you can reintroduce reduced levels of grazing, and I don't think that it will be absolutely disastrous, but I certainly would have to say that grazing needs to be looked at in at least a 5-year time frame to either have no grazing or very limited grazing.
Okay, thanks for sharing your opinion. We have a couple more questions coming in. Larry Loftus asks, has Jerry experimented with using Plateau herbicide?
Oh, for about 20 years almost. And with some occasions have been fairly successful. Most occasions have been problematic. It functions well if you're coming in behind a fire and you've got fairly decent organic matter soils, and you can get it. You can get it to do its thing, control the cheatgrass or the annuals, and then get your seeding in about 10 to 12 months later. If you seed in low organic matter soils in less than 10 months, you are most likely going to kill most of what you plant.
Okay, thanks. Angela Link asks, at what year do you expect to have the level of shrub cover needed for sage-grouse habitat?
That's a good question. We've got several areas that we've worked on in that the sage-grouse have started using the area by the latter part of year 2 and 3. Into year 3, we oftentimes get some active sage-grouse roosting, not necessarily other aspects of the sage-grouse life cycle, but they like to move into these new areas. Oftentimes, if there is young sage associated with the areas, why the wintering sage-grouse really go after that young sage. And so to get it big enough, where you're probably going to be at 10 plus years to where you've got sagebrush that is adequate to provide cover.
Okay, thanks. Katie Grenier has another couple of questions. How are restored stands changing over longer periods of time? Are the native bunch grasses persisting in drought conditions? Is spore diversity increasing?
Okay, two good questions, very good questions. The catch to all this is that you have the genetically local appropriate material to plant. If you bring in something from higher precip or distant areas, why the likelihood that they're going to function well is very small. So if you've got the seed zones that has being worked with mainly the Forest Service on developing good seed zones, I think is a very important step in the direction of being successful. I really would not undertake a large restoration project if all we had to work with was cultivars. I don't believe that it's successful. We've got some sites where we're using the local genetic material that is just getting stronger and healthier and more diverse every year, and I just can't argue with it. I mean, the genetic issues have been long established in forestry and tree plantings and development, and it's really only in the last 10 or 15 years gotten some understanding in the shrub steppe communities.
Great. And Katie also asks, have you used mulching as part of the process?
Only to the extent that we have the residual materials on the soils. If you go back and look at those, some of those photos that I showed that were like the seeding or the pre-seeding site, there's quite a bit of material out there that keeps the soil temperature down, holds the moisture in better, but we have never actually applied mulch except where it was in like a power line or a road type deal. But as far as a landscape type restoration, we've never used mulch.
Okay. And Matt Davies asks, are you generally introducing sagebrush seed too? And if so, are you doing this once grasses are established?
Yes, and the issue is that sagebrush and the competition relationship between the grasses and the sagebrush is on the best soil sites, the grasses always dominate. On the little poorer soil sites, the sagebrush can get off, and then it takes multiple years for these communities to kind of grade back and forth as the sage will move, and quite often doesn't move very fast into the better soil sites. So you get quite a mosaic out of it, and I try to not actually plant sage on the better soils simply because it'll just be outcompeted in the early years.
Great. All right. Thank you. That looks like the last question.
Okay.
We would greatly appreciate it if the attendees would take our 3-question survey of this webinar that will appear after the webinar has ended. And I want to let you know that a recording of this webinar will be sent to you automatically through the GoToWebinar system tomorrow, and I will also post it on our Great Basin Fire Science Exchange website within the next couple of weeks. Our 8th webinar in this series, titled Restoring Soil Crusts in the Great Basin, presented by Jane Belknap, will take place next Tuesday, the 24th. If you have more questions regarding this webinar or have requests for future webinars, please email or call me anytime. Thank you all for your participation today, and thank you so much, Jerry, for your presentation. That was great.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody has any specific question that comes up later on, why, feel free to contact me directly.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Okay,
all right.
Goodbye.
All right, bye. Have a great day, everyone.